And joining us now to talk about the gender pay gap, the National Press Secretary for the RNC, Kirsten Kukowski. It's Equal Pay Day, and Kirsten, I know you know that this is sort of a signature issue for me. I've written a book about it, and you know where I stand on it. So having said all that, I really appreciate your coming on and having a conversation about this. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
So let's just start by understanding where we both stand on this. Do we both agree that there is a problem, and a big one, with equal pay for women?
Yes, I do agree. We agree as Republicans. There is a problem with discrimination, and there is a gender gap. And I guess what I wanted to come on and talk to you about is we do agree that there needs to be equal pay for equal work. But what the Democrats are doing in this conversation, which is really unfortunate for voters across America, is they're not having an honest conversation. And that's what we're here to have. So first off, yes, there is discrimination in the workplace, and we need to take care of that. Republicans stand for equal pay for equal work. But what the fundamental difference is we need to understand and have this conversation with America that it is illegal currently under the laws in this country to discriminate based on gender. And what we don't agree with is that we need to have more government, more regulation that's actually going to end up hurting women and, in fact, all employees.
So let's go
if
right
we
there.
Go forward with
illegal,
this legislation.
Kirsten, it's illegal to discriminate, but it happens. And it happens because it goes undetected. So I wonder, first of all, why you wouldn't support, why anybody wouldn't support the Paycheck Fairness Act. What is the problem with transparency, especially when it pertains to making sure women and men are paid equally?
Well, we agree that there needs to be transparency. Where we disagree is that is what this legislation is going to actually achieve. We believe that actually having more regulation on employers is actually going to backfire and actually harm women and harm employees because there's unnecessary burden. So what we need to do is we do need to have this conversation. We need to have transparency. We need to all understand that there is work to be done, but we can't have more government in this. And we have to have an honest conversation. And we're tired of having the Democrats go out there and make assertions and assumptions about what Republicans believe when actually it's completely inaccurate. We all agree that there needs to be equal pay for equal work.
Let me tell you what I believe, because you talk about unnecessary burden. Sometimes there needs to be an unnecessary burden. I think the fact that discrimination happens, sometimes it happens without even necessarily a concerted effort to discriminate. It just exists. There is a disparity. I experienced this disparity, and I was blessed to have a male counterpart that was willing to take on this fight with me. I was blessed to have a platform to discuss it. I was blessed to have a boss who was progressive and self-aware enough to look at it and deal with it. What about the women who don't have this voice? What about the women who need transparency, who need companies to take on that unnecessary burden to deal with the problem so they can feed their families equally to the way men who work can feed their families?
I don't think there's a whole lot of disagreement here. I completely understand and agree that there needs to be transparency, and I too am blessed to have a great boss who is willing to let me have that seat at the table, or encourage me to have that seat at the table and encourage me professionally. But what I don't want, and I think where the fundamental difference is that I do not agree that putting more government into this problem is going to be a solution. I actually think it's going to take us backwards. And so where I think we need to focus, and where I think if the Democrats were being honest with us and with the public, is that we'd start focusing on jobs and the economy. And those are things that if they were to look at the 40 pieces of legislation that the House has passed that would tackle the economy and the fact that women are being hurt under this economy, then we would actually be able to move forward. But instead, here we have this conversation that it seems very political because of the timing that they bring it up, and that they're not willing to actually have an honest conversation and use math that makes sense.
Okay, I'll talk about the political timing. There isn't. I mean, this was the first thing the president did with the Lilly Ledbetter Act. There was no reason for it politically except that it was the right thing to do. And it seems to me you've got House Republican Conference Chairman Cathy McMorris Rodgers as the only GOP woman in leadership in either chamber, and a concerted effort now. It seems to me you guys could use a little good politics as it pertains to women, especially given the last presidential election.
Well, on the politics, I disagree on the timing. I think that what we have seen since the president has been in the White House, they controlled the House, they controlled the Senate, they controlled the White House, and they did not do this. Instead, what we see is this creeps up every time the Democrats are struggling with their messaging. When Obamacare is really struggling, when the economy is really struggling, that's when they all of a sudden shift and they have this quote-unquote war on women. And that's really, no, I'm not saying this is about Obamacare. I'm saying when the Democrats have nothing to talk to the voters about, they tend to talk about this. And it's unfortunate because we want to have this conversation, and this is a good conversation to have, and the transparency is good.
Come back when we have more time, because I think we should have more of a conversation about this, and I don't think it creeps up when they need it. I think this is something our country needs. And I'm really glad you have a seat at the table. I hope you are paid equally for it. Kirsten Kukowski, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Here with us now from the White House.